The dust cloud trailing behind Gabriel Cruz's pickup truck settled slowly in the afternoon heat as he parked in front of what remained of his father's ranch house. The weathered structure sagged under the weight of decades and neglect, its once proud frame now held together by stubbornness and peeling paint. Gabriel's calloused hands gripped the steering wheel as he stared at the place that was supposed to be their salvation. "This is it?" Isabella's voice cut through the truck's cab like a blade. At 15, she possessed her mother's sharp intelligence and her father's unwavering gaze, though right now that gaze held nothing but disdain. "Dad, this place looks like it's about to fall down." Gabriel stepped out into the oppressive Texas heat, his boots crunching on the gravel driveway that had seen better decades. The land stretched before them, 15 acres of drought-scorched earth dotted with mesquite and struggling oak trees. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. To the east, a barn listed dangerously to one side, its roof patched with mismatched tin sheets that caught the sun like broken mirrors. "Your grandfather built this place with his own hands," Gabriel said, shouldering their bags. His voice carried the weight of reverence and desperation in equal measure. "Every board, every nail, it's solid underneath all this." Izzy slammed the truck door harder than necessary. "Grandfather died when I was 7, Dad. I barely remember him. And I definitely remember having friends back in town." She kicked at a loose board on the front porch steps. "Why couldn't we just stay in the apartment?" Because the apartment was a box, Gabriel thought, but didn't say. Because the bills were mounting and his construction job barely covered groceries. Because every night he listened to her breathing through the thin walls and wondered if this was the life Maria would have wanted for their daughter. Instead, he fumbled with the keys the lawyer had given him 3 weeks ago, when the inheritance notice had arrived like an answer to prayers he'd been too proud to voice. The front door groaned open, revealing a living room frozen in time. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that filtered through grimy windows. Gabriel's father had been a man of simple tastes, evident in the worn leather furniture and the photographs covering every surface. Pictures of cattle drives, family gatherings, and a younger Gabriel in his army dress uniform before deployment overseas. Izzy picked up one of the framed photos, studying her father's face from 15 years ago. "You look different here," she said quietly. "Younger, happier." Gabriel busied himself opening windows, letting the cross breeze chase away the stale air. "That was a long time ago, mija. Different life." As the afternoon wore on, they explored the property together. Gabriel showed her the old tool shed, still stocked with his father's implements, each one carefully maintained despite years of disuse. The corrals needed repair, but the bones were good, built to last. In the back pasture, they found the family cemetery, 3 simple headstones marking 3 generations of Cruz family men. "Will Mom be buried here someday?" Izzy asked, running her fingers over the carved stone of her great-grandfather's marker. "If you want her to be," Gabriel said. "This is your legacy too, Izzy. Your roots." "Roots in dirt," she muttered, but her voice lacked its earlier venom. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, the sound of an approaching vehicle drew their attention. Rosa Alvarez's ancient Chevy truck pulled into the driveway, its bed loaded with casserole dishes and grocery bags. "Gabriel Cruz, you stubborn fool," Rosa called out, climbing down from the driver's seat with the grace of someone half her 60 years. She'd been his father's neighbor and friend for decades, running the small diner in town that served as the unofficial community center. "I told your papa I'd look after this place if something happened to him. Didn't expect it would be you coming back." She embraced Gabriel with the fierce affection of family, then turned to Izzy with the same warmth. "And you must be Isabella. Your grandmother showed me pictures, but you're even prettier in person. You have your mama's eyes." As they unloaded Rosa's supplies, she spoke in the rapid-fire Spanish of someone comfortable with her audience, mixing warnings with welcomes. "The house needs work, but it's good work, honest work. Your papa, he always said this land would call his son home when the time was right." But as they settled on the front porch with cold drinks, Rosa's expression grew serious. "Gabriel, there's something you need to know. There's been new trouble in the area. People asking questions, looking at properties. Not the kind of people who plan to raise cattle." Gabriel's military-trained instincts, dormant but not dead, flickered to attention. "What kind of people?" The kind that make offers people can't refuse, Rosa said carefully. The kind that make Sheriff Medina nervous, and that man doesn't scare easy. Izzy looked between the adults, sensing undercurrents she couldn't quite grasp. What does that mean? It means we keep our eyes open, Gabriel said, his voice taking on an edge that made Rosa nod approvingly, and we don't let anyone push us around. As Rosa prepared to leave, she gripped Gabriel's shoulder. Your papa saw something in this land worth fighting for. Maybe it's time you saw it too. That night, as Izzy fell asleep in her new room to the sounds of settling wood and distant coyotes, Gabriel stood on the front porch looking out over the property. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders like familiar gear. This land was more than inheritance. It was possibility. It was home. And Rosa's warning echoed in his mind like a tactical briefing from another life. Whatever was coming, they would face it here, together. 3 days into their new life at the ranch, Gabriel noticed the black Suburban with tinted windows parked along the county road for the 3rd morning in a row. His hands stilled on the fence post he was setting, muscle memory from a dozen deployments whispering warnings his civilian mind tried to ignore. The vehicle was too clean for ranch country, too expensive for the area, and positioned with a clear line of sight to the house. "Dad?" Izzy called from the porch, her voice carrying concern. "There's someone here to see you." Gabriel turned to see 2 men approaching from a white pickup truck he hadn't heard arrive. Both wore work boots and button-down shirts, but their clothes were too new, their boots unscuffed by honest labor. The taller one, with graying temples and calculating eyes, extended a hand as Gabriel walked over. "Mr. Cruz? I'm David Martinez, and this is my associate, Jim Roberts. We're land surveyors working in the area." The handshake lasted a beat too long, applying pressure Gabriel recognized as a dominance test. "Beautiful property you have here." "Not looking to sell," Gabriel said flatly, releasing the man's grip. Martinez laughed, a sound without genuine humor. "Oh, we're not buyers, Mr. Cruz. We're just documenting land usage patterns for the county. Mind if we ask how long you've owned this place?" Gabriel's eyes flicked between the 2 men, cataloging details. Roberts stood slightly back and to the right, classic Overwatch position. Both men's shirts bulged slightly at the hip. "Long enough. You have permits for this survey?" "Of course," Martinez said, patting his shirt pocket but making no move to produce documentation. "We're particularly interested in your eastern boundary. Does it extend all the way to Willow Creek?" The question was specific enough to sound legitimate, but Gabriel knew every inch of his property lines from the inheritance paperwork. More concerning was why anyone would care about water access and natural corridors. "Think you gentlemen should be talking to the county assessor's office." Roberts spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a slight accent. "Sometimes it's easier to get information from the source, you know? Saves everyone time and trouble." The word trouble hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Gabriel kept his expression neutral, but his awareness sharpened to combat readiness. "Gentlemen, I've got work to do. You need anything official, contact my lawyer." As the men walked back to their truck, Gabriel noticed Roberts scan the house, the outbuildings, the approach roads. Not casual observation, tactical assessment. The black Suburban started its engine and pulled away just as the surveyor truck disappeared down the drive. That afternoon, Sheriff Arturo Medina's patrol car crunched up the gravel driveway. Gabriel had known Medina peripherally for years. The man had been a deputy when Gabriel left for the army, working his way up through patience rather than ambition. Now in his 50s, Medina carried the weight of 3 decades of small-town law enforcement in his weathered face and tired eyes. "Gabriel," Medina said, climbing out of his cruiser with the careful movements of a man whose back ached more days than not. "Heard you'd come back to fix up your daddy's place." "Sheriff!" Gabriel wiped his hands on a rag, noting how Medina's gaze swept the property much like Roberts had, but with different purpose. "What can I do for you?" "Just checking in, mostly. Town's been different lately. New faces, new money moving through. Sometimes that means new problems." Medina accepted Gabriel's offer of iced tea, settling onto the porch steps with a grunt. "You meet any interesting people since you've been back?" Gabriel described the morning's visitors without mentioning his suspicions. Medina listened with the practiced patience of a man accustomed to sifting truth from worry. "Survey crews have been busy lately," Medina said finally. "Lot of interest in rural properties. course, not all of its legitimate development. He paused, studying the ice in his glass. Gabriel, you served overseas. You know how to read situations. If something feels wrong, it probably is. But you also know when to fight and when to be smart about things. You telling me to be careful, Sheriff? I'm telling you to be aware. And maybe careful about who you trust completely. Sometimes people get caught between things bigger than they understand. After Medina left, Gabriel found Izzy in the kitchen making sandwiches for dinner. She'd been quieter since the surveyor's visit, and he could see questions building behind her dark eyes. "Those men this morning weren't really surveyors, were they?" she asked without looking up from the counter. Gabriel leaned against the doorframe, studying his daughter's profile. She had her mother's intuition along with her intelligence. "What makes you say that?" "Real surveyors have equipment. Instruments. Those guys just had clipboards." She finally looked at him. "And you got tense. Like, really tense. Different than usual." "Maybe I'm just protective of our new home." Izzy set down the knife she'd been using and turned to face him fully. "Dad, I've been watching people my whole life. I know when adults are lying to make me feel better. Something's happening, isn't it?" Gabriel felt the familiar tug between protection and honesty that had defined his parenting since Maria's death. Izzy deserved truth. But how much truth could a 15-year-old carry? "I think some people might be interested in our land for reasons that don't involve cattle ranching," he said carefully. "But that doesn't mean we're in any immediate danger." That evening, Rosa called with news that made Gabriel's concerns more concrete. 3 more families on the north side got visits from buyers this week, she said, her voice tight with worry. All cash offers, all above market value, all refused. What kind of buyers? The kind that don't take no for an answer gracefully. The Morales family found their fence cut and 2 steers missing the night after they said no. Could be coincidence. Gabriel doubted it was coincidence. After ending the call, he walked the perimeter of his property as darkness fell, noting sightlines, approaches, and defensive positions with eyes that hadn't evaluated terrain tactically in years. The skills came back like muscle memory, unwelcome but undeniably useful. As he checked the locks on the barn, Gabriel caught a glimpse of headlights moving slowly along the county road, too slow for normal traffic. The vehicle paused at the end of his driveway for nearly a minute before continuing on. Inside the house, Izzy was doing homework at the kitchen table, her concentration absolute. But Gabriel noticed she'd positioned herself where she could see both the front and back doors, and her textbook was opened to a chapter on Texas history that included a section on border conflicts. His daughter was preparing herself for trouble she couldn't name but somehow sensed approaching. Gabriel felt a surge of pride mixed with protective fury. She was tougher than either of them had known, but she shouldn't have to be. That night, Gabriel loaded his grandfather's old shotgun for the first time since inheriting the ranch. The morning sun was barely visible through the dust cloud kicked up by the convoy of black vehicles rolling down Gabriel's driveway. 3 SUVs and a pickup truck, moving with the coordinated precision of a military operation but lacking the discipline. Gabriel watched from the kitchen window as men poured out of the vehicles, their movements casual but alert. "Izzy, go to your room," Gabriel said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that made his daughter look up sharply from her cereal. "What's happening?" "Now, Misha, close your door and don't come out until I call for you." Isabella started to argue, then caught sight of the vehicles through the window. Her face went pale, but she nodded and disappeared down the hall. Gabriel heard her bedroom door close, followed by the soft scrape of her desk chair being wedged against it, something he'd taught her years ago without ever expecting she'd need to use it. Gabriel stepped onto the front porch as the lead man approached. Tall and lean with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no, he wore expensive jeans and boots that had never seen real work. His smile was all teeth and calculation. "Mr. Cruz, beautiful morning, isn't it?" The man's English was perfect, but carried traces of an accent that spoke of border towns and back alleys. "I'm Mateo Herrera. My friends call me Lobo." Gabriel remained on the porch, using the elevation to psychological advantage. "What can I do for you, Mr. Herrera?" "Please, it's Mateo. We're going to be neighbors, after all." Herrera gestured broadly at the landscape, as if he already owned it. "I represent some investors interested in rural properties. We've heard you might be looking to sell." "You heard wrong." Herrera's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. "Mr. Cruz, you seem like a practical man. This ranch, it's a burden, yes? Needs work, costs money. Your neighbors, they've been very reasonable about our offers." Gabriel had heard about those reasonable neighbors. The Morales family had found dead cattle in their water tank after refusing to sell. The Williamses had suffered a convenient barn fire. Sheriff Medina's warnings were looking more prophetic by the hour. "The ranch isn't for sale," Gabriel said. "Not to you, not to anyone. Everything is for sale, Mr. Cruz. It's just a matter of price." Herrera pulled out a leather portfolio, withdrawing a cashier's check with a flourish. $200,000. Cash. Today, that's 3 times what this place is worth on paper. Gabriel didn't look at the check. "You're wasting your time." For the first time, Herrera's mask slipped slightly. His men shifted restlessly behind him, hands drifting toward concealed weapons. "Mr. Cruz, let me be clear. This area is experiencing rapid development, new businesses, new opportunities. But change can be disruptive for those who resist it." "Is that a threat?" "It's reality." Herrera folded the check and tucked it back into his pocket. "You see, some investments require specific geographic advantages. Transportation corridors. Privacy. Your land sits right where my investors need it to sit." The words confirmed Gabriel's worst suspicions. This wasn't about development or legitimate business. Herrera's investors needed the ranch for smuggling, using its location near the border and existing cattle trails to move drugs, weapons, or people. Gabriel's refusal wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a strategic obstacle. "My answer's still no," Gabriel said, his voice carrying a finality that would have ended most conversations. Herrera studied him for a long moment, reassessing. "You know, Mr. Cruz, I've been doing business in this area for several years now. Most people, when they understand the situation, they become very cooperative. But occasionally, we meet someone who thinks they're different. Special." Behind Herrera, his men spread out in a loose semicircle, professional but obvious. Gabriel counted 6, noted the bulges under their shirts, calculated fields of fire and cover positions. Old habits, but suddenly relevant again. "Let me tell you what I see," Herrera continued, his voice dropping to conversational tones that somehow carried more menace than shouting. "I see a widowed man trying to play rancher with a teenage daughter to protect. I see someone who thinks he can stand against progress because he's stubborn or proud or stupid. Which one are you, Mr. Cruz?" Gabriel's hands remained relaxed at his sides, but every muscle in his body was coiled for action. "I'm a father who wants to give his daughter a home." "Fathers want their daughters to be safe," Herrera said. "Beautiful girl, by the way. I saw her in town yesterday. Such pretty eyes. Would hate for something to happen to those pretty eyes." The threat against Izzy hit Gabriel like a physical blow, but years of military discipline kept his reaction internal. His voice remained level when he spoke, but something in his posture shifted slightly. Herrera, focused on intimidation, missed the subtle change from civilian to predator. "Mr. Herrera," Gabriel said quietly, "I think this conversation is over." "Is it?" Herrera smiled again, but the expression had gone from calculating to cruel. "Mr. Cruz, you've lived a quiet life, kept your head down. Worked construction, paid your bills, minded your own business. That's smart, that's survival." He gestured at the ranch at the house where Izzy was hidden. "But this? This is you stepping into a game where the rules are different, where being stubborn gets people hurt. You understand what I'm telling you." Gabriel understood perfectly. He also understood that men like Herrera interpreted cooperation as weakness, and weakness as invitation. There would be no negotiating with this problem, no compromise that didn't end with his family destroyed or displaced. "I understand," Gabriel said, "that you've made a mistake coming here." Something in his tone finally penetrated Herrera's arrogance. The cartel lieutenant's eyes narrowed as he studied Gabriel more carefully, seeing details he'd missed before. The way Gabriel stood, balanced and ready. The scars visible on his forearms, the flat, emotionless expression that came from looking at death too many times to be impressed by it. "Mistake?" Herrera laughed, but it sounded forced. "Mr. Cruz, I think you're confused about who has the power here." Gabriel descended the porch steps slowly, closing the distance between them. Herrera's men tensed, but their boss held up a hand. "The power," Gabriel said, belongs to whoever's willing to use it. You came here thinking you were dealing with some broke rancher you could scare into selling. You thought wrong." For a moment, the two men stood face to face, and Herrera caught a glimpse of something in Gabriel's eyes that made him take an involuntary step backward. Whatever this man had been before inheriting a ranch, it wasn't construction work and quiet desperation. "1 week," Herrera said, recovering his composure but unable to completely mask his unease. "1 week to think about my offer. After that, the price goes down. Way down." He gestured to his men, who began moving back toward their vehicles with the disappointed reluctance of predators denied their prey. "Oh, and Mr. Cruz? Ask around town about what happens to people who make bad business decisions in this area. Educational stories, you might say." As the convoy pulled away, Gabriel remained on the front steps until the dust settled and the sound of engines faded. Only then did he call out to his daughter. "You can come out now, Izzy." She emerged from her room pale but composed, and Gabriel felt another surge of pride at her courage. But when she spoke, her question cut straight to the heart of everything he'd been trying to avoid. "Dad," she said quietly, "who were you before you were my father?" Gabriel looked at his 15-year-old daughter, seeing Maria's intelligence burning in her dark eyes, and realized the time for half-truths was over. Herrera had made this personal the moment he threatened her. Whatever came next, Izzy deserved to know who her father really was. "That," Gabriel said, "is a long story. And after what just happened, it's a story you need to hear." The first fence was cut on a Tuesday night, 3 clean slices through the wire that let Gabriel's small herd of cattle wander onto the county road. He found them at dawn, standing confused in the asphalt heat while early commuters honked and swerved around them. It took Gabriel and Izzy 2 hours to herd the animals back onto their property, and another hour to repair the fence with wire that looked like it had been severed with bolt cutters. "Coincidence?" Izzy asked, examining the clean cuts. "No such thing," Gabriel replied, his military training surfacing in the systematic way he photographed the damage and cataloged the repair costs. "This is probing, testing our response time, our resources, our patience." That afternoon brought Sheriff Medina, who dutifully wrote up Gabriel's complaint while managing to convey that nothing would come of it. Could have been kids, Medina suggested without conviction, or maybe the wire was old, snapped under pressure. Gabriel held up a piece of the severed fencing. "This wire was cut with industrial tools, Sheriff, clean as surgery." Medina's eyes flicked away. "I'll make a note of it. But Gabriel, sometimes these rural properties, they attract vandalism. Best thing might be better security. Cameras, maybe. Motion sensors. Or maybe law enforcement that actually enforces the law." The words hung between them like an accusation. Medina's face reddened, but when he spoke, his voice carried exhaustion rather than anger. "Gabriel, you think I don't know what's happening in my county? You think I like writing reports that disappear into filing cabinets?" He gestured toward town. "I got a wife, 2 kids in college, and a pension 3 years away. Sometimes a man has to pick his battles." After Medina left, Gabriel began walking his property lines with the methodical precision of a soldier securing a perimeter. He noted sight lines, choke points, and defensive positions while mentally cataloging the tools in his father's workshop. What had seemed like sentiment before now looked like strategic resources. Thursday brought the second test. Izzy was schooling her horse, Luna, in the round pen when a pickup truck roared past on the county road, windows down, music blaring. The sudden noise spooked the mare, who bolted toward the fence with Izzy clinging to her back. Gabriel's heart stopped as he watched his daughter fight to control 1,200 pounds of panicked horseflesh. Izzy's skill kept her in the saddle, but barely, and when Luna finally stopped, both horse and rider were trembling. "That was deliberate," Izzy said, sliding down from Luna's back on unsteady legs. "They slowed down right before they gunned it past us." Gabriel examined the truck's tire tracks in the dirt, noting the aggressive acceleration pattern and the fact that the vehicle had stopped just out of sight around the bend, probably to observe the results of their harassment. "From now on," Gabriel said, "you don't work Luna unless I'm here, and you stay close to the house after dark." "Dad, I'm not going to hide because some jerks want to scare us." Gabriel looked at his daughter, seeing Maria's defiant streak blazing in her dark eyes. "This isn't about hiding, Mija. It's about being smart. These people are testing us, looking for weaknesses. We don't give them any." That night, Gabriel couldn't sleep. He found himself standing at windows, checking locks, listening to the normal sounds of a ranch settling for the night and trying to distinguish them from potential threats. At 3 a.m., he heard engines in the distance, powerful vehicles moving without lights. The sound came and went like a fever dream. But in the morning, he found fresh tire tracks on the fire road that bordered his eastern property line. Friday evening brought Rosa with groceries and news that made Gabriel's jaw clench. "The Henderson place sold yesterday," she announced, setting bags on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. "Cash sale, signed papers before sundown." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Gabriel knew the Henderson Ranch, a modest spread 2 miles north that had been in the family for 3 generations. They say why they sold. "Sarah Henderson told me they got an offer they couldn't refuse. But Gabriel, I've known that woman for 20 years. She was scared, really scared." As if summoned by their conversation, the sound of gunshots echoed across the evening air. 3 sharp cracks from somewhere to the south, followed by silence. Gabriel's body went rigid, every nerve ending suddenly alive with combat awareness. "Could be someone hunting," Rosa said, but her voice lacked conviction. Gabriel was already moving toward the gun cabinet, muscle memory guiding him to weapons he'd hoped never to touch again. Hunting season doesn't start for 2 months, and those were handgun rounds, high caliber. Izzy appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face pale but determined. "What do we do?" "We stay alert," Gabriel said, checking the loads in his father's shotgun with practiced efficiency. "And we start treating this like what it is." "Which is what?" Rosa asked. Gabriel looked at the 2 women who meant everything to him, then out the window at the land his father had died protecting. "A siege." Over the weekend, the harassment escalated. Someone scattered broken glass across the driveway entrance, forcing Gabriel to spend Saturday morning clearing debris. Sunday brought paint thrown at the ranch house's front door, bright red splashes that looked disturbingly like blood in the morning light. But it was Monday morning that brought the real test. Gabriel was feeding the cattle when he heard Luna's terrified whinny from the direction of the barn. He ran toward the sound, finding Izzy's horse rearing and striking at something Gabriel couldn't see. The snake was a diamondback rattler, easily 6 feet long and thick as Gabriel's wrist. It had been placed in Luna's stall deliberately, coiled and ready to strike at anything that entered. Only the horse's instincts had prevented a potentially fatal encounter. Gabriel killed the snake with a shovel, then stood staring at its remains while rage built in his chest like pressure in a boiler. This wasn't random vandalism or escalating intimidation. This was attempted murder, disguised as an accident that would have devastated his daughter while sending a clear message to the community. "They're done playing games," Gabriel told Rosa when she arrived that afternoon. "This was meant to hurt Izzy, maybe kill her." Rosa's face went white. "Gabriel, maybe it's time to consider their offer. Take the money, start over somewhere else." "Where?" Gabriel's voice carried an edge Rosa had never heard before. "Where do we run to that men like Herrera can't follow? Where do we go that they won't find us next month, next year, and decide we're still a problem that needs solving?" He looked out at the land his father had carved from nothing, at the house where 4 generations of Cruz men had raised their children. "No, Rosa. Running just makes you prey, and I'm done being prey." That evening, Gabriel called a number he'd memorized 15 years ago but never expected to use again. The phone rang 3 times before a familiar voice answered. "Torres." "Val, it's Gabriel Cruz." Silence on the line then. "Jesus, ghost. I figured you were dead. It's been, what, 10 years since you dropped off the grid?" 15. "Val, I need help." "Where are you?" Gabriel told her, explained the situation in the clipped, tactical language they'd once used to brief missions in places the world had forgotten. Captain Valeria Torres had been his second-in-command in the worst places the Army had sent them. The kind of soldier who could read a situation at a glance and adapt to any threat. "How fast can you get here?" Gabriel asked. "Fast enough. Gabriel, what aren't you telling me?" Gabriel looked toward the house, where Izzy was doing homework at the kitchen table, trying to maintain normalcy in a world that was rapidly becoming anything but normal. "I've got a daughter, Val, 15 years old. These people threatened her." The silence stretched longer this time. When Torres spoke again, her voice carried the cold precision Gabriel remembered from their worst days overseas. "I'll be there tomorrow night." "And Gabriel?" "Start thinking like a soldier again." because from what you're describing, you're gonna need to be one. After ending the call, Gabriel found himself staring at his reflection in the darkened kitchen window. For 15 years, he'd been Gabriel Cruz, the construction worker, the widowed father, the quiet man who paid his bills and minded his own business. But underneath that careful facade, Staff Sergeant Gabriel Cruz was still there, waiting. Mateo Herrera had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed Gabriel was just another broken rancher who could be intimidated into submission. He'd never bothered to ask what Gabriel had done before inheriting a ranch, or why a man who'd lived peacefully for 15 years might know how to kill a rattlesnake with military efficiency. Tomorrow Herrera would begin learning the difference between a victim and a veteran. Captain Valeria Torres arrived after midnight in a black Ram pickup that looked deceptively civilian until Gabriel noticed the reinforced bumpers and run-flat tires. She stepped out of the truck moving like a predator, her dark hair pulled back in a tactical ponytail, wearing jeans and a canvas jacket that couldn't quite conceal the service pistol at her hip. "You look like hell, Ghost," she said, embracing Gabriel with the fierce affection of someone who'd trusted him with her life in a dozen forgotten hellholes. "You look like you never left the service. Private security now, corporate protection, high-value asset recovery. Pays better than the Army, and nobody shoots at me unless I let them." Her eyes swept the ranch, automatically cataloging defensive positions and fields of fire. "Tell me about the threat." Gabriel led her to the kitchen table, spreading out hand-drawn maps of his property alongside photographs of the harassment incidents. Torres studied everything with professional intensity, occasionally asking sharp questions that reminded Gabriel why she'd been the best tactical mind in their unit. "Cartel?" she asked, examining the photo of the cut fence. "Regional operation, but connected to bigger organizations. The lieutenant calls himself El Lobo, real name Mateo Herrera. Smart enough to start with psychological warfare, patient enough to escalate slowly. But not smart enough to research his target." Torres looked up from the maps. "Gabriel, what does your daughter know about your service record?" Gabriel felt something twist in his chest. "Nothing. I've been just her dad for 15 years. Construction worker, homework helper, the guy who makes pancakes on Sundays. That's about to change." Before Gabriel could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Izzy appeared in the kitchen doorway, her hair messy from sleep but her eyes alert. She'd inherited her mother's ability to sense when important conversations were happening without her. "Dad, I heard voices." Gabriel felt the weight of 15 years of careful deception pressing down on him. He'd built his relationship with Izzy on the foundation of being her protector, her provider, her safe harbor in a world that had taken her mother too young. How did he explain that he'd also been a killer, a ghost who'd moved through the world's dark places eliminating threats to national security? "Izzy, this is Valeria Torres. She's an old friend of mine from before." Torres stepped forward, extending her hand with a smile that managed to be both warm and assessing. "You can call me Val. Your father's told me a lot about you." Izzy shook her hand, studying the older woman with teenagers' intuitive ability to sense adult secrets. "Before what?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Gabriel looked at his daughter, seeing Maria's intelligence burning in her dark eyes, and realized that Herrera's threats had destroyed any chance of maintaining the careful fiction of his civilian life. "Before you were born," Gabriel said carefully, "I was a soldier. I know that. You have pictures upstairs. Not just any soldier, Mija. I was part of a special unit. We did difficult jobs in dangerous places." Torres watched the exchange with professional interest, recognizing the moment when Gabriel's carefully compartmentalized lives began to merge. "Your father was the best operator I ever served with," she said quietly. "Smart, brave, and absolutely loyal to the people he protected." Izzy looked between them, processing information with a speed that had always amazed Gabriel. "What kind of difficult jobs?" Gabriel felt the familiar weight of classified operations and moral complexities settling on his shoulders. How did he explain counterterrorism to a 15-year-old? How did he describe the necessity of violence without romanticizing it? "We stopped bad people from hurting innocent families," he said finally. "Sometimes that meant using skills most people don't have and don't want to have." "Skills like what?" Torres answered when Gabriel hesitated. "Combat tactics, weapons training, surveillance and counter-surveillance. how to read people, how to predict their actions, how to stop them when necessary. Izzy absorbed this information with the composure that had been growing stronger since their first encounter with Herrera's men. The men who came here the other day. You recognized what they were, didn't you? Gabriel nodded. Predators testing prey, looking for weakness, for fear, for points of vulnerability they could exploit. And you're not prey. No, mija, I'm not. Torres smiled at the exchange, recognizing the family dynamic that reminded her why Gabriel had been such an effective leader. His protective instincts had always been his greatest strength, the motivation that made him willing to walk into any danger if it meant keeping others safe. So what do we do? Izzy asked. Gabriel felt something fundamental shift in the kitchen, a passing of trust from father to daughter that acknowledged her right to understand the danger they faced. We show Mr. Herrera that he made a mistake when he threatened our family. Over the next hour, Torres laid out tactical options with the methodical precision Gabriel remembered from mission briefings. She'd brought equipment in her truck, surveillance cameras, motion sensors, communications gear, and weapons that made Gabriel's father's hunting rifles look like children's toys. The ranch has good defensive characteristics, she said, sketching fields of fire on Gabriel's hand-drawn maps. Single-access road, clear sightlines, natural choke points. But you're isolated, which cuts both ways. How long before Herrera escalates to direct action? Gabriel asked. Soon. He's established a pattern of increasing pressure, and the snake in the horse stall was attempted murder disguised as an accident. Next step is probably a direct assault designed to look like a robbery gone wrong. Izzy listened to the tactical discussion with growing understanding. You're talking about a war. Gabriel looked at his daughter, seeing the child he'd protected mixing with the young woman she was becoming. We're talking about survival. These people won't stop because we ask nicely, or because we call the sheriff. They'll stop when they understand that the cost of continuing is higher than the value of what they want. Your father's right, Torres said. Men like Herrera respect only strength. Show weakness, and they'll destroy you slowly. Show strength, and they'll either retreat or escalate to a level where you can finish this permanently. Gabriel felt the familiar weight of command decisions settling on his shoulders. For 15 years, he'd avoided conflicts that required the skills Torres was cataloging. He'd been a father, not a soldier, a protector through love rather than violence. But Herrera had made Izzy a target, and that changed everything. What do you need from me? Torres asked. Gabriel looked out the kitchen window at the land his father had died protecting, then at his daughter, who was watching him with complete trust. I need you to help me teach Izzy how to stay alive. Dad. No arguments, Mija. If we're going to fight, you need to know how to protect yourself, how to use cover, how to communicate under stress, how to stay calm when everything goes wrong. Torres nodded approvingly. Smart. The best weapon is always awareness, and the best tactic is not being where the bullets are going. As they planned, through the night, Gabriel felt 15 years of careful civilian identity falling away like shed skin. Staff Sergeant Gabriel Cruz was emerging from the quiet rancher's careful facade, bringing with him skills and instincts that had kept his team alive in the world's most dangerous places. By dawn, they had a plan. Herrera wanted a war, and Gabriel was going to give him one. But it would be fought on Gabriel's terms, on his ground, with rules that only a man who'd spent years hunting killers would understand. The last thing Herrera would see before he died would be the difference between a victim and a veteran. The barn fire started just after midnight on Thursday, 3 days after Torres's arrival. Gabriel woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Luna's terrified whinnying, his combat instincts pulling him from sleep to full alertness in seconds. Through his bedroom window, he could see orange flames dancing against the night sky, consuming the old structure his grandfather had built with hand-hewn timbers. Izzy, he called, pulling on boots as he ran toward her room. Fire! We need to move! His daughter was already awake, dressed, and reaching for the emergency bag they'd packed according to Torres's protocols. The military precision of her response filled Gabriel with equal parts pride and heartbreak. No 15-year-old should have to sleep ready for combat. They burst from the house to find Torres already deployed near the burning barn, her rifle trained on the tree line where muzzle flashes winked like deadly fireflies. The tactical radios she'd installed crackled with her calm voice. 3 shooters, eastern approach, professional spacing, suppressing fire pattern. Gabriel felt the familiar calm of combat operations settling over him like a comfortable coat. His civilian panic transformed into soldier's focus as he grabbed his rifle and moved to cover Izzy's approach to their predetermined rally point behind the water tank. "Stay low, mija," he called. "Serpentine pattern, just like we practiced." Izzy ran with the fluid grace Torres had drilled into her over the past 3 days, her body automatically using available cover while her eyes scanned for threats. Gabriel watched his daughter move like a young soldier and felt something break inside his chest. Another piece of her childhood sacrificed to other people's violence. The attackers had made one critical mistake. They'd planned their assault assuming they were dealing with a frightened rancher and his teenage daughter, not a former special forces operator and a combat veteran with modern equipment and tactical training. Their suppressing fire was undisciplined, their positioning obvious to eyes trained in real warfare. "Ghost, I have movement on the south side," Torres's voice came through the radio. 2 more, trying to flank through the equipment shed. Gabriel keyed his microphone. "Roger. Izzy, stay behind the tank. I'm moving to intercept." "Dad, be careful." Gabriel felt his heart squeeze at her voice, then pushed the emotion aside and let Staff Sergeant Cruz take control. He moved through the darkness like a predator, using shadows and terrain features to approach the flanking team unseen. These weren't soldiers. They were street thugs with military surplus weapons, dangerous but undisciplined. The first attacker died without knowing Gabriel was there, a quick blade thrust between ribs that dropped him silently to the ground. The second man turned at his partner's strangled gasp, giving Gabriel the opening to close distance and break his neck with clinical efficiency. "South side clear," Gabriel reported, feeling the familiar mixture of satisfaction and revulsion that came with necessary killing. The barn fire had become a roaring inferno, casting wild shadows that danced across the ranch like demons. Through the flames, Gabriel could see movement, more attackers using the fire as cover to advance on the house. "Val, they're using the fire as concealment." At least 4 more moving up the main approach. "I see them." Switching to thermal scope, Torres's rifle began speaking in measured cadences, each shot carefully placed to eliminate threats with professional precision. Gabriel heard screams and curses in Spanish as Herrera's men discovered they weren't fighting civilians, but battle-tested killers who'd learned their trade in far deadlier places. Through the chaos, Gabriel heard a new sound that made his blood freeze, Luna's terrified neighing from inside the burning barn. Izzy's horse was still trapped in the inferno, probably injured or panicked beyond the ability to escape. "The horse is still in there." Izzy's voice cut through the tactical chatter, raw with anguish. Gabriel looked at the barn, calculating odds and time factors with soldiers' ruthless mathematics. The structure was fully involved, the roof beginning to sag toward collapse. Anyone entering would have maybe 2 minutes before the building became a death trap. "Izzy, no," he called, but his daughter was already moving, her love for her horse overriding tactical discipline. Gabriel watched 15 years of careful protection evaporate as Izzy ran toward the burning barn. Every instinct screamed at him to stop her, to tackle her to the ground and hold her safe regardless of the horse's fate. But he also saw the determined courage in her movement, the same fierce loyalty that had defined the Cruz family for generations. Instead of stopping her, Gabriel did what any father would do. He ran into hell to protect his child. The interior of the barn was an oven, filled with smoke and falling debris. Gabriel found Izzy wrestling with Luna's halter, while the panicked mare reared and struck at shadows. The horse's eyes were white with terror, her coat already singed by falling embers. "She's trapped," Izzy called over the roar of flames. "The stall door is jammed." Gabriel examined the twisted metal, seeing where the intense heat had warped the hinges beyond normal operation. He drew his sidearm and shot the lock mechanism apart, then grabbed Luna's lead rope as the door swung free. "Move," he called, guiding both horse and daughter toward the barn's main entrance as the roof structure groaned ominously overhead. They emerged from the inferno just as the barn's peak collapsed in a shower of sparks and burning timber. Luna bolted toward the safety of the open pasture while Gabriel and Izzy rolled away from the heat, their clothes smoking and their lungs burning from smoke inhalation. "Touching family moment," a familiar voice called from the darkness, "but unfortunately, it ends here." Mateo Herrera stepped into the fire's glow, flanked by two remaining gunmen who kept their weapons trained on Gabriel and Izzy. The cartel lieutenant looked less polished than during his previous visit, his expensive clothes scorched, and his face bearing the frustrated rage of a predator whose easy meal had turned into a costly fight. "You killed 8 of my men tonight, Mr. Cruz," Herrera said, his voice carrying genuine surprise beneath the anger. 8 trained sicarios, eliminated by a rancher and his friends. Quite impressive. Gabriel positioned himself between Herrera and Izzy, calculating angles and distances while keeping his hands visible. "Your men weren't trained. They were thugs with guns." "Perhaps, but they were my thugs and they represented a significant investment." Herrera's smile held no warmth. "You've caused me serious inconvenience, Mr. Cruz. Forced me to escalate this situation beyond simple business into something personal." Gabriel felt Izzy tense behind him, preparing to move. Through their shared ordeal, his daughter had learned to read his body language, to anticipate his actions. He hoped she was smart enough to recognize when he was about to do something desperate. "Here's what's going to happen," Herrera continued. "You're going to sign the deed over to my shell company tonight, and then you're going to disappear, along with your daughter and anyone else who might cause problems later." "Ugh. And if I refuse?" Herrera's smile widened. "Then I stop pretending this is about real estate and start treating it like the war you've obviously prepared for. More men, heavier weapons, no more restraint. How long do you think you can protect your daughter when I bring 50 sicarios instead of 10? Gabriel stared into Herrera's eyes and saw the truth there. This man would escalate until Gabriel's resistance crumbled or everyone he loved was dead. There could be no negotiation, no compromise, no solution that didn't end with one of them in the ground. "Okay," Gabriel said quietly. "You win." Herrera's smile became genuine for the first time. "Excellent. A practical decision." Gabriel began reaching slowly toward his shirt pocket, as if retrieving a pen to sign documents. Herrera's attention focused on the movement, expecting surrender and already savoring victory. Instead, Gabriel drew his concealed knife and threw it in a single fluid motion that sent the blade spinning through 15 feet of firelit air to bury itself in the throat of Herrera's left gunman. As the man dropped, Gabriel was already moving, using the distraction to close distance with Herrera while Izzy rolled toward cover behind the water tank. The remaining gunman swung his weapon toward Gabriel, giving Torres the clear shot she'd been waiting for from her concealed position. The rifle's crack split the night, and the gunman's head snapped back as Torres's bullet found its mark. Gabriel tackled Herrera to the ground, 15 years of suppressed violence, erupting in a fury that surprised them both. The cartel lieutenant was strong and vicious, but Gabriel had learned to fight in places where losing meant death for everyone he protected. They rolled through the dirt and ashes, trading brutal strikes that would have crippled lesser men. Herrera drew a knife, slashing at Gabriel's ribs and opening a gash that painted his shirt red. Gabriel responded by driving his elbow into Herrera's solar plexus with enough force to crack ribs. "You think you've won something?" Herrera gasped, blood running from his mouth. "Kill me, and they'll send 100 men, 1,000. You can't fight the entire organization." Gabriel pinned Herrera's knife hand to the ground, then looked down at the man who'd threatened his daughter with the flat, emotionless expression that had earned him the call sign, Ghost. "Maybe not," Gabriel said quietly, "but I can start with you." The knife that ended Mateo Herrera's life was his own, turned against him with the precise knowledge of anatomy Gabriel had learned in a dozen classified operations. As the cartel lieutenant's eyes went dark, Gabriel felt no satisfaction, only the grim completion of a necessary task. When Sheriff Medina arrived 20 minutes later, drawn by reports of gunfire and the glow of the burning barn, he found Gabriel and Izzy sitting on the front porch steps with Torres. 8 bodies lay scattered around the ranch, testimony to what happened when predators chose the wrong prey. "Jesus Christ, Gabriel," Medina whispered, staring at the carnage. "What the hell happened here?" Gabriel looked at the man who'd warned him to be careful, who'd hinted at corruption and compromise without ever taking a stand. "Justice happened, Sheriff. The kind that actually works." Medina's hand shook as he surveyed the scene, probably imagining the reports he'd have to write, the questions he'd have to answer. "This is going to bring heat. Federal heat. Cartel heat." "Let them come," Gabriel said, feeling Izzy's hand slip into his. "They'll find I'm not as easy to kill as they think." As the barn fire finally died to glowing embers, Gabriel realized that the quiet rancher he'd tried to be for 15 years was gone forever. In his place stood Staff Sergeant Gabriel Cruz, protector of his family and defender of his land. Herrera had wanted a war, and now he had one. The morning after Herrera's death brought an eerie quiet that Gabriel recognized from combat zones, the stillness before overwhelming retaliation. As he and Torres buried the cartel bodies in unmarked graves on the back 40, Gabriel knew they'd crossed a line that would bring consequences no amount of preparation could fully address. "They'll send everything they have," Torres said, leaning on her shovel as sweat dripped from her forehead. Herrera wasn't just muscle, he was a regional lieutenant. His death will be seen as a declaration of war. Gabriel nodded, studying the horizon where heat waves already distorted the morning air. "How long do we have?" "Days, maybe hours if they have assets already positioned." Torres pulled out her satellite phone, checking for messages. "I've got contacts who can provide intelligence, but Gabriel, we're talking about fighting a small army with 3 people." From the house, they could hear Izzy practicing with the radio equipment Torres had installed, her young voice crisp and professional as she ran through communication protocols. In 3 days, she'd absorbed tactical training that would have taken most people weeks to master, her natural intelligence adapting to survival skills with frightening efficiency. "She's ready," Torres observed, following Gabriel's gaze. "Tougher than most soldiers I've served with." "She shouldn't have to be." Gabriel spent the afternoon turning his family ranch into a fortress, using knowledge gained in Afghanistan and Iraq to transform peaceful farmland into overlapping fields of fire. He and Torres placed explosive charges at choke points, established fallback positions, and created communication networks that would allow them to coordinate during the chaos of combat. Izzy worked alongside them with grim determination, her childhood officially ending as she learned to sight rifle scopes and memorize escape routes. Gabriel watched her test the motion sensors around Luna's new hiding spot in the equipment shed, her movements precise and purposeful. "Dad," she called from the barn's ruins, where she was setting up a concealed observation post, "I found something." Gabriel approached to find Izzy holding a military-grade radio, its frequency display showing cartel communication channels. One of Herrera's men had dropped it during the firefight, and Torres quickly began monitoring the encrypted chatter. "They're mobilizing," she reported after listening for several minutes. 40 to 50 Sicarios heavy weapons, coordinated assault planned for tonight." Gabriel felt the familiar weight of impossible odds settling on his shoulders. In the service, he'd faced similar situations with backup, air support, and extraction plans. Here, he had only his daughter, his friend, and 15 years of suppressed skills. That evening, Rosa arrived with supplies and news that made Gabriel's blood run cold. "They took the Murphy family," she said, her voice shaking. "Grabbed them from their house this morning. Word is they're being held as leverage to make you surrender." The Murphys were neighbors, decent people with 2 small children who'd never done anything more aggressive than complain about property taxes. Now they were prisoners, because Gabriel had chosen to fight instead of running. "Where?" Gabriel asked. "Old Ramirez warehouse, 10 miles south." "But Gabriel, it's a trap. They want you to come for them." Torres studied tactical maps while Gabriel wrestled with impossible choices. "It's classic cartel strategy," she said. "Force you to divide your attention between defending your position and rescuing hostages." Gabriel looked at his daughter, seeing determination mixed with fear in her dark eyes. "We can't leave the Murphys to die because of our war." "And we can't save them if we're dead," Torres replied. "Gabriel, you're thinking like a father instead of a soldier. In combat, sometimes you have to accept casualties to accomplish the mission. The mission is protecting innocent people. That's what it's always been." As darkness fell, Gabriel made his decision. They would defend the ranch through the night, then launch a rescue operation at dawn when the cartel would expect them to be weakened and demoralized. The first probing attacks came just after midnight, small teams testing their perimeter defenses while larger forces positioned themselves for the main assault. Gabriel moved through his prepared positions like a ghost, eliminating scouts with silent efficiency, while Torres provided overwatch with her sniper rifle. Izzy handled communications and observation, her young voice steady as she reported enemy movements and coordinated their defensive fires. Gabriel felt pride and heartbreak in equal measure as he listened to his daughter become a soldier. "Contact, south fence line," she reported. 6 tangos with RPGs advancing on the house. Gabriel triggered the first defensive charges, turning the approaching squad into scattered casualties in a burst of fire and shrapnel. The explosion lit up the night, revealing more attackers than he'd hoped, but fewer than he'd feared. "They're not sending everything at once," Torres observed through the tactical radio, "probing for weaknesses, testing our capabilities." Gabriel understood the strategy. The cartel commanders were learning from Herrera's mistake, treating him as a serious threat rather than an amateur to be crushed. It meant they respected his skills, but it also meant they'd keep escalating until they found a weakness to exploit. As the night progressed, Gabriel realized the true nature of their siege. This wasn't just about eliminating resistance to cartel operations. It was about sending a message that no one could successfully oppose their authority. His ranch had become a symbol, and symbols had to be destroyed completely. By dawn, they'd repelled 4 separate assault waves, but ammunition was running low, and exhaustion was beginning to affect their reaction times. Worse, the radio chatter indicated the cartel was bringing heavier weapons for the next phase. "They're bringing in a technical," Torres reported, referring to a pickup truck mounted with a heavy machine gun, plus mortars and possibly anti-tank rockets. Gabriel checked their remaining supplies, calculating odds with the cold mathematics of a professional soldier. They could hold for maybe one more major assault before being overrun. "Time to go get the Murphys," he told Torres, "before they bring enough firepower to level this place." The rescue mission required splitting their tiny force, leaving Izzy alone to monitor the ranch while Gabriel and Torres infiltrated the Ramirez warehouse. As they prepared to depart, Sheriff Medina's patrol car appeared on the access road, moving slowly with its emergency lights flashing. "Could be legitimate," Torres said, watching through binoculars, "or it could be exactly what it looks like." Gabriel studied the approaching vehicle, noting details that set off every alarm his training had installed. Medina was driving alone, which violated standard protocol for responding to an active combat zone. His approach was too slow, too cautious, like someone marking time until a predetermined moment. "Izzy, get to the fallback position," Gabriel ordered. "Take Luna and the emergency supplies. Don't come back until we signal all clear." His daughter started to argue, then saw something in his expression that stopped her. She nodded and disappeared toward the equipment shed, where they'd prepared a hidden bunker for exactly this contingency. Medina climbed out of his cruiser with hands visible, but Gabriel noticed the man's tactical vest was missing and his radio was switched off. Classic signs of someone operating outside official channels. "Gabriel," Medina called, "we need to talk. Federal agents are en route, and you need to surrender before this gets worse." Gabriel and Torres flanked the sheriff from concealed positions, their weapons trained on a man Gabriel had known for 20 years. "Sheriff?" Gabriel called back. "Why don't you tell us who's really coming?" Medina's shoulders sagged, and when he looked up, his face carried the defeated expression of a man whose compromises had finally collapsed around him. "Gabriel, they have my wife. They took Sarah this morning, said they'd kill her if I didn't bring them intel on your defenses." The admission hung in the air like cordite smoke. Gabriel felt something twist in his chest. Not surprise, but disappointment. He'd suspected Medina's loyalty was compromised, but hearing the confirmation still stung. "How long?" Gabriel asked. 6 months. Started small. Looked the other way on some shipments, delayed some investigations, but it kept escalating, and now—" Medina's voice broke. "Gabriel, they made me tell them about your daughter's daily routines, where she rides her horse, what time she does chores." Gabriel's blood turned to ice water. "What did you tell them?" "Everything. The bunker location, your defensive positions, when you sleep. They know about Torres, about your military background, about the weapons cache." Medina looked like a man dying from the inside out. "They're not coming to arrest you, Gabriel. They're coming to end this permanently." Torres's voice crackled through Gabriel's earpiece. "Multiple vehicles approaching from 3 directions. Looks like the entire cartel force, plus some new players in tactical gear." Gabriel grabbed Medina's radio, switching to emergency frequencies. "This is Gabriel Cruz at the old Cruz Ranch. Officer needs assistance. Shots fired. Multiple casualties." "That won't work," Medina said quietly. "I already reported that my radio was malfunctioning. Dispatch thinks I'm investigating a routine disturbance call. The betrayal was complete and professional. Gabriel realized he'd been outmaneuvered by an organization that had years to study his patterns and exploit his weaknesses. They'd used Medina's access to plan the perfect assault, timing it for maximum psychological impact. "Where's my daughter?" Gabriel asked, suddenly understanding why the approaching forces felt wrong. Medina couldn't meet his eyes. "They took her 20 minutes ago. Found her hiding spot using coordinates I provided. She's alive, but Gabriel, they want you to surrender or they'll start sending pieces." Gabriel felt the world narrow to a single point of cold fury. For 15 years he'd tried to be the father Izzy deserved, protecting her from violence and horror. Now his past had reached out to drag her into the darkness he'd spent his adult life trying to escape. "Where?" Gabriel's voice carried a flatness that made Medina step backward. "The old grain elevator 5 miles east, but Gabriel, it's heavily defended. 40 men. Heavy weapons. Prepare positions. They want you to come. It's a trap designed to end this war with maximum publicity." Torres appeared beside Gabriel like a shadow, her expression grim. "Gabriel, we can't assault a hardened position with 2 operators. It's suicide." Gabriel stared at the horizon where his daughter was being held by monsters who'd already demonstrated their willingness to torture innocents. Every tactical instinct screamed that Torres was right. They needed backup, better intelligence, overwhelming firepower to have any chance of success. But as he listened to the approaching engines and calculated the time remaining before the ranch was overrun, Gabriel realized that tactical considerations were irrelevant. Izzy was everything that mattered, the reason he'd retired from war in the first place. "Sheriff," Gabriel said quietly, "you're going to help us get her back." "Gabriel, I can't." "You put her in danger. You'll help fix it, or I'll kill you here and now." The words carried the absolute conviction of a man who'd run out of patience for compromise. Medina looked into Gabriel's eyes and saw 15 years of suppressed violence focusing to a lethal point. "What do you need me to do?" "You're going to drive Torres and me to that grain elevator. You're going to get us inside. And you're going to pray my daughter is unharmed when we find her." As they loaded weapons and equipment into Medina's patrol car, Gabriel felt the last vestiges of his civilian identity burning away. Staff Sergeant Gabriel Cruz was taking control completely, bringing with him skills and instincts that had made him legendary in the darkest corners of the world. Izzy was in the hands of killers, and Gabriel was going to remind everyone exactly why they used to call him Ghost. The war was about to become personal. The grain elevator stood against the dawn sky like a concrete monument to industrial decay, its cylindrical towers rising 8 stories above the surrounding scrubland. Gabriel counted positions through binoculars while Torres spotted targets, and Medina provided intelligence on the facility's layout. 12 guards visible, probably twice that many inside, Torres reported. Sniper nests on the upper levels, machine gun positions covering the approaches. Professional setup. Gabriel studied the defensive positions with the cold analysis of a predator planning a hunt. The cartel had chosen their ground well. Clear fields of fire, multiple levels for defensive depth, limited cover for attacking forces. Under normal circumstances, assaulting such a position would require a full company with armor support. There, Medina pointed to a maintenance building attached to the main structure, service tunnels that connect to the old grain processing equipment. They might not know about them. Gabriel memorized the approach routes while calculating timing and coordination requirements. "How many men can you get inside?" "None," Medina replied. "Gabriel, I'm telling you this is suicide. Even if you reach Izzy, you'll never fight your way out." "Then we don't fight our way out," Gabriel said quietly. "We end it here." Torres checked her equipment with professional precision: rifle, sidearm, breaching charges, communications gear. "Gabriel, what aren't you telling me?" Gabriel looked at his oldest friend, remembering operations they'd survived in places that officially didn't exist. "This isn't a rescue mission, Val. It's a termination operation. Every cartel leader in the region is probably inside that building, thinking they're about to execute a public victory." Understanding dawned in Torres's eyes. "You want to decapitate their entire command structure. I want to send a message that reaches all the way to Mexico City. Touch my family, and I'll burn your organization to the ground." They approached the grain elevator using a dry creek bed that provided concealment until they reached the perimeter fence. Gabriel moved like liquid shadow, using skills honed in Afghanistan's mountain valleys to slip past sentries who never knew death had walked beside them. The maintenance tunnels were exactly where Medina had indicated, dark concrete passages that reeked of grain dust and motor oil. Gabriel led Torres through the maze of service corridors, following sounds and air currents toward the main processing floor where voices echoed in Spanish. Through a ventilation grate, Gabriel could see the cartel's command post, a conference table surrounded by men whose photographs had appeared in DEA briefings for years. Regional commanders, financial officers, and enforcement specialists who controlled drug trafficking across 3 states. And in the center of their gathering, zip-tied to a chair with blood trickling from her nose, sat Isabella Cruz. Gabriel felt something primal and murderous rise in his chest as he watched his 15-year-old daughter maintain her composure while surrounded by killers. Her eyes were alert, cataloging faces and details with the intelligence that had always amazed him. 12 targets, Torres whispered, studying the tactical situation. Guards at 2 exits, overlapping fields of fire. We go in loud. Gabriel shook his head, drawing his knife instead of his pistol. We go in quiet. I want to talk to them before they die. The first guard died without making a sound, Gabriel's blade finding the gap between vertebrae with surgical precision. The second guard turned at his partner's absence, giving Torres the opening to snap his neck with clinical efficiency. Gabriel entered the main floor like a wraith, materializing behind the conference table before the cartel commanders realized their security had been compromised. His pistol pressed against the head of the senior leader, a gray-haired man whose expensive suit couldn't disguise the brutality in his eyes. "Gentlemen," Gabriel said conversationally, "I believe you have something that belongs to me." The room erupted in shouts and reaching hands, but Gabriel's voice cut through the chaos with deadly calm. "The first man who moves gets to watch his boss's brains redecorate this wall." Slowly, hands moved away from weapons as the cartel leaders realized they were facing someone far more dangerous than the broken rancher they'd expected. Gabriel's reputation had preceded him through channels they'd never known existed. "Mr. Cruz," the gray-haired leader said carefully, "perhaps we can reach an accommodation." "No accommodations," Gabriel replied. "No negotiations. No mercy." He looked at his daughter, seeing strength and defiance burning in her dark eyes despite her injuries. "You okay, Mija?" "I'm fine, Dad. But these men hurt the Murphy family." Gabriel felt something cold and final settle in his chest. "Where are the Murphys?" Silence stretched until Gabriel pressed his pistol harder against the leader's skull. "Basement level," the man gasped. "Alive, but injured." "Torres, get them. Take Izzy and the hostages to the extraction point." "Gabriel." "That's an order, Captain." Torres recognized the tone from their darkest operations, when Gabriel's protective instincts transformed him into something beyond human mercy. She cut Izzy's restraints and began moving toward the basement stairs. "Dad?" Izzy called back. "What about you?" Gabriel looked at his daughter, memorizing her face in case he never saw her again. "I'll be right behind you, Mija. I just need to finish something first." As Torres and Izzy disappeared down the stairwell, Gabriel turned his attention back to the men who'd threatened his family. 12 cartel commanders who'd built their empire on the suffering of innocents, who'd thought they could intimidate a quiet rancher into submission. "You made one mistake," Gabriel told them conversationally. "You assumed I was like other people, that I valued my own life more than my daughter's safety." The gray-haired leader tried to speak, but Gabriel wasn't interested in final words or pleas for mercy. These men had forfeited their right to life the moment they put their hands on Isabella. The killing was methodical and professional, each death designed to send a specific message to whoever found the bodies. Gabriel worked with the clinical precision of a surgeon, using techniques learned in classified programs that officially didn't exist. When Torres's voice crackled through his earpiece, "Extraction complete, all packages secure," Gabriel was already placing his final calling card. The C4 charges Torres had taught him to make, positioned throughout the grain elevator's support structure. Gabriel reached the extraction point. As the first explosions ripped through the building's foundation, the grain elevator collapsed in a controlled demolition that buried the cartel's regional command structure under tons of concrete and steel. "Jesus, Gabriel," Torres breathed, watching the destruction. "You just eliminated half the cartel's leadership in 3 states." Gabriel pulled his daughter into his arms. feeling her solid warmth and breathing life. "Good," he said quietly. "Maybe now they'll understand that some people aren't worth threatening." As they drove away from the collapsing grain elevator, Gabriel felt 15 years of careful restraint finally lifting from his shoulders. He'd tried to be a peaceful man, a quiet father who protected his family through love instead of violence. But some threats required an older kind of protection, the kind that came from skills learned in the world's darkest places. Gabriel had reminded the cartels that some prey was too dangerous to hunt. The war was over, and Gabriel Cruz had won. 3 months after the grain elevator's collapse, Gabriel stood on his rebuilt front porch watching Izzy work Luna through practice jumps in the new corral. The mare moved with fluid grace, her coat gleaming in the morning sun, both horse and rider having healed from their ordeal with the resilience that seemed to define the Cruz bloodline. The ranch bore new scars and new strengths. Where the old barn had burned, Gabriel and Torres had constructed a modern facility with hidden defensive positions and emergency protocols. The pastures were green again after the autumn rains, and the cattle moved peacefully across land that had seen too much violence but endured nonetheless. Sheriff Medina had resigned the day after the grain elevator incident, his confession leading to a federal investigation that swept away years of cartel corruption. His replacement was a young deputy from El Paso who treated Gabriel with the respectful wariness reserved for dangerous allies. The DEA called again, Torres announced, joining Gabriel on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. She'd stayed to help with the rebuilding, though they both knew her presence was more about friendship than security. "They want to debrief you officially about the cartel's command structure." Gabriel shook his head. "Nothing to debrief. I was protecting my family from home invaders." Torres smiled at the carefully constructed fiction that had allowed Gabriel to avoid federal charges. The official story was that a gas explosion had destroyed the grain elevator during a confrontation with kidnappers. No one questioned how 12 cartel leaders had died or why their organization had subsequently collapsed across 3 states. "Any word from Mexico City?" Gabriel asked. Radio silence. "Complete organizational breakdown south of the border. Turns out when you eliminate an entire regional command, it takes years to rebuild operational capacity." Torres studied Gabriel's profile. "You scared them, Ghost?" "Really scared them." Gabriel watched his daughter guide Luna through a complex series of turns, her concentration absolute and her skill growing daily. Izzy had returned to school but carried herself differently now, calmer, more aware, with an inner strength that commanded respect from classmates who'd once seen her as just another ranch kid. "Dad," Izzy called, waving from the corral. "Rosa's here!" Rosa's ancient Chevy truck rumbled up the driveway, its bed loaded with supplies for the evening's gathering. She'd organized a community barbecue, officially to celebrate the ranch's rebuilding, but really to mark the neighborhood's return to peace. As neighbors began arriving with covered dishes and cautious smiles, Gabriel realized how much had changed. These were the same people who'd whispered about his inheritance, who'd doubted his ability to make the ranch profitable. Now they looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and healthy wariness, understanding that quiet Gabriel Cruz could be something far more dangerous when his family was threatened. "You did good, son," Rosa said, squeezing Gabriel's shoulder as children played in the yard where killers had once stopped. "Your papa would be proud." Gabriel thought about his father's legacy, the land, the values, the stubborn refusal to surrender what mattered. He'd added his own chapter to that legacy, written in violence and sacrifice, but ultimately preserving what 4 generations of Cruzmen had built. As sunset painted the sky orange and purple, Gabriel found himself on the front porch again, this time with Izzy beside him. She'd grown 3 inches since inheriting the ranch, though Gabriel suspected her increased height had less to do with genetics than with the confidence that came from surviving hell and emerging stronger. "Think they'll come back?" she asked quietly. Gabriel looked out over the land his father had carved from nothing, where his daughter would someday raise her own children. "No, Misha. They understand now that some things aren't worth the cost of taking." Izzy nodded, then surprised him by leaning against his shoulder with the casual affection he'd feared was lost forever. "I'm glad we stayed." Gabriel felt something ease in his chest, a tension he'd carried since the first day they'd arrived at the dilapidated ranch. They'd faced the worst humanity could offer, and emerged not just intact, but stronger. Izzy had learned she could survive anything, and Gabriel had learned he could still be both protector and father. "Me too," Gabriel said, wrapping his arm around his daughter as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. "This is home." The ranch stretched before them, scarred but enduring, a testament to the truth that some legacies were worth any price to preserve. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.